Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Bruce Boise. Bruce is the author of Cold Comfort, One Man's Struggle to Stop the Illegal Marketing of Powerful Opioid Drugs and Save Lives. Now, Cold Comfort was just published this week, and it is a firsthand account of a pharmaceutical area manager's journey of going undercover to expose his employer's illegal and unethical marketing practices to sell drugs off-label at the cost of human life. And if this is not familiar to you, what should be is our nation's deadly opioid overdose epidemic, which is, from what I'm reading, is not over. Dangerous practices of the pharmaceutical and medical industries and the shortcomings of the FDA to adequately protect the American public health is one of the reasons why we're going to be sitting here today talking to Bruce. So, Bruce, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Hey, Howard, thank you much for having me.
So I have to share with you, as I was beginning to do my research for the book and I was reading about Cold Comfort and the work that you have been involved with, you brought shivers back to me, having spent some time indirectly in the pharmaceutical industry myself, helping get new drug applications, the NDA or the ANDAs. I even remember those acronyms, but you're bringing back memories, I have to tell you. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. And before we kind of dive into Cold Comfort, One Man's Struggle to Stop the Illegal Marketing of Powerful Opioid Drugs and Save Lives, I want to learn a little bit more about who is Bruce Boise. Tell us about your background.
Well, I was born and raised in Ohio. My father was a dentist. He was a World War II vet and a Silver Star recipient. In my family life, duty bound was a lot that went on and hard work. And so, and that's probably true with most people when I grew up at this period of time. Wound up going to college and learning and then getting into the pharmaceutical industry and became a lowly rep and worked my way up to an area manager's position with Cephalon.
Okay. Cephalon was your first pharmaceutical job out of college?
No, it was Carter Wallace was my first job out of many other jobs. And then finally landing in Carter Wallace. And that was my first job in pharmaceuticals. And Cephalon was really my second job. And those are the only two companies I worked for almost 24 years between those two.
I mean, 24 years, that is a career. That is a career.
It is a career, yes.
What prompted you to pursue this career in the pharmaceutical industry? And did you start off in sales or were you in the regulatory or some other aspect of pharma?
It's sort of funny. It was that I'd graduated and got married and starting a family. And I was bouncing around to other low-paying management jobs and really sort of decided that what I was doing, it wasn't for me. And I left the job and I was walking home and there was a medical dictionary on the sidewalk. And I picked up the medical dictionary. I looked at it. It was really sort of like, a red flag saying, you know what? Why don't you go sell pharmaceuticals? Your dad was a dentist. You talked about medicine all your life. And so it seemed like a natural for me. That's how it started.
So when you went into the industry, you started off in sales? You were probably, we used to call them the Ken and Barbies. You were a Ken.
Yeah, but back then it was really just men.
Really?
And that's why, we were called detail men.
Okay.
Because we detailed the package insert.
So, I mean, these package inserts, I mean, you as part of your training, I mean, you had to know, to a certain extent, the science and everything about the drug.
Oh, yeah, very much so, Howard. You were trained in not just the pharmacology of your drug, you were trained in the pharmacology in everybody's drug within the therapeutic area you were competing against. And you were also trained in anatomy and medicine and medical conditions that you were trying to treat with your product.
So as you were then going through training and you've spent, 20 some years in this industry, was there one therapeutic area that you were focusing on? Because I know the opioids it was very big for pain relief, specifically for the end stage of cancer treatment when the patient, they're just in a tremendous amount of pain.
Yes. Really what, in the 24-year period, I was in pulmonology, I was in allergy, I was in sleep medicine, psychiatry, neurology, orthopedics. There was a broad range in the 24-year period that I would be within those kind of medical fields on and off most of my career. The one that I probably liked the best was neurology.
Okay. And as you were making a name for yourself, you became a proficient manager. Now you have people working for you out on the field. When did this inkling of there's something going on here that's just not right, when did that first start to kind of raise up to the surface for you?
It was around the year 2000, and we had a national meeting, and I had an area managers meeting, and we were sitting there, and this one area manager, his reps made a ridiculous amount of money in bonus on a product, Gabatril, that was not used for seizure activity. They were promoting it for anxiety. And I was just sort of flabbergasted that he was blatantly promoting it off-label to his reps to go out to the doctors to promote Gabatril for anxiety. And he really didn't have any data. And I thought it was just extremely reckless of him. And I thought, well, what I need to do is I need to let the company know what was going on. And as I found out that it had nothing to do with one area manager, it was the company's program from the top down.
So when you raised this concern with your management, what was their response back to you?
The one response that sort of came in on a regular basis was like, really? Is that what's going on? Like, almost like I didn't even know what I was talking about. And I'm going, can they be so blind that they don't know that that's going on? Well, that wasn't it at all. They just didn't want me to say anything.
They were gaslighting you.
Sure. And, they had stock options, and they just didn't want all that to fall apart for them. So they were just saying, oh. And then when I would press and I said, well, here's the facts. Well, Bruce, I don't know if that's our policy, but I'll get back with you and we'll report back to the sales manager that's in charge of that. And it was just sort of pushing me off till finally my manager at the time turned around and said, well, why don't you just go to HR? And I think I was so naive to that. Basically, that was saying, I'm going to get rid of you and you're going to take a severance package and you're gone.
Right. So how prevalent was this taking a drug which was formulated for a specific indication and now it being taken off label? Because as I understand it, physicians have a lot of latitude. All right.
Yes, they're allowed to write an off-label prescription if the patient needs that and they have that call, and that's legal. What's not legal is the pharmaceutical company promoting an off-label or off the indication, the FDA-approved indication, to a doctor.
Okay. So I've got a question, and this might be a little bit of a tangent off, but I assure you we're going to come back. And hopefully you know the answer to this question. When did pharmaceutical advertising get approved again to be, on our TV, on our radio, in our magazines? Because I remember growing up, you weren't allowed to, but then all of a sudden everything's being advertised everywhere. Was that around 2000? Was it earlier?
I think it was around then.
Okay.
I think it actually was around then. Even the physicians didn't want to advertise their clinics. And so you had a real pushback maybe 20 years ago about a pharmaceutical advertising or a physician, even lawyers. And this may be really surprising, but there was a period of time that lawyers didn't really advertise either. So and that may be farther back. But what I'm saying is that now it seems like it's either a campaign advertisement. Sorry to throw that in, but it's either a campaign advertisement or it's a pharmaceutical advertisement.
Right. In around the 2000, doctors are starting to prescribe this drug off-label. How are they being educated? Is this something they're going and taking it upon themselves to learn more about, well, what can I do for my patient? Because hopefully they're coming at it from a very altruistic, I want to help my patient. How are they getting this information to even contemplate thinking to take this drug and go off label with it?
How the system worked, Howard, was that the reps would have targeted doctors.
Okay.
So let me back you up. So let's say we have Gabatril, Provigil, and Actique. Gabatril is the seizure drug. Provigil is the drug for excessive daytime sleepiness associated with narcolepsy. And Actique is for cancer breakthrough pain of patients that were probably terminally ill. So those are your products and those are the indications. Now, what the company did was that Gabatril was being promoted for anxiety and also neuropathic pain. Provigil was promoted for excessive daytime sleepiness associated with like MS fatigue and also augmentation for depressed patients. And Actique was then being promoted for pain with low back pain and also with migraine patients. And the company then actually went from going into pain centers into family practice with Actique, which is a fentanyl product for your listeners and a Schedule II. Can be really dangerous to give that kind of drug to an opioid naive patient. So that's what the process, that's what the marketing format was. What the rep did was that they would go into the doctor's office and they would talk about medical conditions. Howard, don't you have patients that have pain that is unresolved or refractory to therapy that you're looking for something to help those patients? And Dr. Howard is going to turn around and say, well, sure, Bruce, I do. Well, wouldn't it be good if you try maybe one or two of those patients on Actique? Well, never thought of it, Howard. That'd be a great idea. So what occurs is that then the doctor then is curious because it's a patient that maybe has not responded to therapy. And the doctor now is interested in trying a drug that he knows it's off label. And the next step for the doctor is to say, hey, what kind of information do you have that shows it's effective and the dose and all that kind of information that normally would be on a package insert or an approved FDA indication? What the rep does is that, well, doctor, I can get back with you and I can send you a MIRF, which is a medical information request form, and the company will get back with you with those answers for you. And so they use a medical system that from the home office and send the information. Once the home office sends the information and the rep calls back on that doctor, then the rep plugs the doctor into a CME program that is a sponsored Cephalon program that is a handpicked speaker that talks about their experience in a peer-to-peer group discussion about the off-label use of Actique. That's how it works.
So you're just, the doctor is just getting sucked in hook, line, and sinker.
Yes.
Wow. As this activity was going on and you're getting then pushback from your management, what was your tipping point that I've got to do something about this? This is not right.
Yeah. You know, there were 2 points of demarcation for me. I was going along to get along with the company, and I walked into a doctor's office. I've known the doctor neurologist for a long, long time. And he was a brilliant man, straight shooter, and was always truthful with me. And we had some hard discussions about medicine and his practice, but he always was straight in what he was doing and how he was doing it. And I remember, Dr. So-and-so, we'll see you now, Bruce. And I walked in, and when I walked in, he abruptly turned around and said, I want to stop you right now, Bruce. You are damaging your career if you're going to promote off-label, and I don't want to hear it. And if you're going to do that, you need to leave. And I actually went back I left the office. I went back in the car. I sat in the car, and I thought, what the hell am I doing? That was when I decided that I would try to take an active role to try to correct what was going on. And then the next thing happened. The other point, the tipping point, was a nurse called, and I was just about ready to leave the company. And she said, Bruce, I know you'd do something if you could. if I could get somebody you'd talk to, would you talk to them to make a change? And I said, sure. And I really said that. I didn't mean to placate her in that sense. I just sort of said that to move the conversation on. And her sister was FBI out of Texas. And a month later, OCI, which is the federal investigators for the FDA, got a hold of me, and that's how it started.
And when did this new journey as the quote unquote whistleblower, when did that start for you?
That didn't start until probably more like 2004 when I met Peter Chatfield as my lead counsel. I actually started to work as an undercover informant for the FDA for a year or more, almost 2 years. And I wore a wire. And that was really, I really didn't know much about whistleblowers. And all I knew is that they kept telling me, the feds kept telling me, oh, we need more information. We need this, we need that. And all I was thinking is that, well, I want to stop them doing what they're doing. And so I'm just going to keep working to help them. And that's what I did. And I wore a wire for quite a while and did a lot of work for them. And it was around 2 years. And the lead agent said, Bruce, you really need to protect yourself and get a lawyer. And here's what you need to do. And the agent actually told me what you need to do. And that's when I got a hold of Peter Chatfield. That's when I became a whistleblower.
How did you feel in those 2 years wearing the wire? I mean, what was going through your mind there? I mean, we've all watched the crime dramas. Sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. But Bruce, you're real world right now. How did you feel about wearing the wire and going in? I mean, I imagine you're going to like the quarterly, the annual sales conferences, things like that. But how did you feel when you're in there?
I loved my job. I loved the people I was with. I couldn't have thought of a better career for my life and wanted to stay there. And it took a lot for me to realize that what I was trying to do was bigger than my career and bigger than working with Cephalon at the time. It was an issue where people were going to die. They were just going to die because you can't sell a drug like a fentanyl product off-label to people that are drug naive and not expect addiction and overdose with that. It was really dangerous, especially to migraine patients, which an opioid is contraindicated for migraine patients. So it was one of those things where I sort of had to have a talk to myself about where am I going and what am I doing with this? And, when they asked me to wear the wire, I just figured for a penny, in for a pound. This is what I need to do to finish this. And so that's when I pushed forward with that up until when the lead investigator said that, you really need to get a lawyer. And that person is Greg. And Greg is the one that interviewed with 60 Minutes recently.
Right. Just want to put yourself in the shoes of the Bruce Boyce back in 2000-ish timeframe. Would you still do the same?
Oh, for sure.
Activity?
Oh, there's no doubt.
Okay.
There's no.
And if you could describe a little bit from the advice of the FBI, this agent, you need to get a lawyer up. Had you had any inkling of what was in store for you? Because you've been through the mill. I mean, you've lost it all. You were probably fairly well-to-do. You lost a lot, the job, money.
Oh, I'll give you an idea, Howard. I was net worth over $1 million before I talked to the FDA. And probably my last year, I was doing like $340,000 a year. So when somebody says, well, you did it just for the money, you don't do it for the money. You never do it for the money. If you think you're going to do it for the money, it's never going to work. And so you do it for those issues and whether it's a moral issue or it becomes a legal issue or something inside you that says, I'm just going to pick these cards up, because who's going to pick the cards up for Aunt Betty that winds up getting a Actique lollipop that they find her and she still has the stick in her mouth that she's overdosed. And it just seemed to me that no one was going to do that.
As you now went down this path of really taking on the role of whistleblower, working with the attorney. How did the attorney relationship, how did that affect this new journey that you were on? Because, right now you're on the other end of that journey to a certain extent. I mean, you've got the book, which I do want to go into in a lot more depth, but you came out of this, now you're promoting the book, you're, doing a lot of, speaking, writing, interviews like today. But what was that journey like then with the attorney and continuing to do this whistleblowing activity?
At first with Peter, it was really rough, and Peter knew it was rough. I had, lost my job. I'd lost my career. I'd lost my house. I lost my cars. My kids had to drop out of college. I was riding a bicycle in the winter to get to Kinko's or to a computer center to be able to communicate with my lawyer. And I went through, I got blackballed from the industry, and then I couldn't find a job. And then I was picking up anything. And eventually what happened was that I was regulated to flipping burgers for $10 an hour for a friend. And Peter knew that it was devastating. And this was in fall of 2004. And Peter's firm knew that, I was at the end of my rope. I had tried to contact other lawyers and no one would even talk to me. And when Peter Chatfield and Phillips and Cohen actually decided to take the case, I was like elated. I was going, finally, I've got somebody in my corner.
Well, so let me stop you for 1 second. Why would nobody talk to you? Some of these other firms.
One is that you have to hire it's a False Claims Act. You're working with the statutes in the False Claims Act. And so you need to find a key tem lawyer. So one of the problems is that lawyers would say, oh, I'll take the case. That sounds great because they think there's a lot of money in it. And then you find out that they have no experience in key tem cases or key tem law, right? And so part of that was going on. The other part is that if you had somebody that did work in the False Claims Act, they did it in military fraud. And that's where the False Claims Act came from. It was called Lincoln's Law. So it was developed, I think, in 1867 by Lincoln because of military armaments were defective and soldiers were being killed by the defective military armaments. And so Lincoln wanted somebody to be able, as a citizen that saw the fraud, to step up so that they could do something about it. So it started in Lincoln's period. And that's now is the False Claims Act. And so you really have to have somebody that is familiar with that. And then also not necessarily in military fraud, right? In contracts, you have to have somebody that's familiar in pharmaceuticals. And so Peter did something really brilliant in the sense that it wasn't just about kickbacks. It was about off-label misinformation that was fraudulent. And other lawyers hadn't looked at that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Again, I just want to provide enough context for our listeners now. So you're working with the attorney.
Yep.
And this relationship is lasting now how long?
Oh, my God. I hate to get emotional, but
it's okay. Take your time.
He's one of my best friends. He's been a mentor. He's been unbelievable. So, and we stay in touch. And, he also did an interview with CBS when I did the Whistleblower Show. It's funny. We were together and, I said to him, here we are sitting here and we're going to do interviews. And I go, we do really good work together. He said, we do, don't we?
Oh, boy. Yeah. Let's just only do this once.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Howard, I got to tell you something that's really sort of a funny story. I was interviewing on a wound care company, and I was going through the third interview, and Marilyn May was the U.S. attorney in the 3rd District Federal Court. And Marilyn got a hold of me and said, hey, Bruce, you do this really well. You want to wire a wire for this next interview? I said, absolutely not. That gives you a little insight of how, if it gets somebody that they feel that they're comfortable with, and you do a pretty good job collecting evidence, they're going to ask you again, I guess. But no, I said, absolutely not,
Yeah. I don't think it's an experience that I want to repeat. So now that you've gone through this, when did the idea of the book come about, Cold Comfort?
Probably 10 years ago. There were two cases involved. The first case was on Gabotril, Provigil, and Actique. The second case started with Fentora. That spun into Provigil, Nuvigil, and other products in the second case. But there were really two cases. And so both cases took like 14 years. You really can't write a book. I mean, Peter thought it was a great story, and I agree with him, but you really can't write a book in the midst of a federal case, right? You can't do that.
What is and I'm just curious, 14 years, that's a long time.
Yeah. Don't give up.
Wow. So
don't give up.
So in the book, what is, is the goal of the book to tell the story, to tell your journey, or is it to, is there education here? Because there's a lot going on with whistleblowers. I mean, we hear it all the time. You had, again, I'm probably just cherry picking right now, the whistleblower and Bridgegate for Chris Christie. You had the Officer Vindman and, Congress.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to mention this to people that are listening. The first thing that if you think that this is what you're going to do, and I encourage people to do it, okay? It's a really tough road. You've got to prepare yourself for that. But you really need counsel that's outstanding, and be prepared to really get beat up, and be prepared to have a really tough road to hoe. And if you're able to do that, then go ahead. But just make sure. I was not near prepared because I thought I was going to drop off the cliff a little bit and just wind up getting another job. And I dropped all the way down off the cliff.
How'd you get pulled back?
I'm just an exceptionally positive person, and my heart's full of grace.
So what other advice in the book do you have for, the reader who cares? I mean, there's a lot going on in this world right now. I mean, you think about the off-label, the whole chloroquine issue, it won't go away. And then you get the conspiracy theorists and whatever. Who's the audience for this book?
Well, the first is that, what's the reason for the book? And yeah, a whistleblower, and we talk about that. But it's really about how people didn't do their job that we wound up having an opioid crisis, isn't it? And at the time, obviously, I didn't know there was going to be an opioid crisis. I don't think many did. I don't think the company did. And I think what you want to look at is that it's not just the greed from the pharmaceutical industry, right? It is the FDA. Look at Actique, and they're being fined $425 million for off-label selling of a fentanyl product. What is the FDA doing to allow Fentora to be approved? Good question, isn't it? I mean, so there's a lot here, and there's a lot of thick layers here when they start to read the book that they realize, well, here's the aspect of a whistleblower. Here's what you need to do for like a QI-TAM lawyer and the QI-TAM law and the False Claims Act. And here's all this information, which I have my own opinion about changing legislation. And here's all of a sudden this whole panoramic view of, wow, we fell down with the FDA, even maybe the Justice Department, even maybe the judges involved with the different cases. Because the third district of the federal court is really a pharmaceutical court, okay? And so there's a lot here to look at. Now, as far as when you read the book, what am I trying to promote? I'm trying to promote patient advocacy or patient rights, where I talk about FedUp and PROP, which is Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing. So there's a lot of other multi-organizational groups that I think can really help. So in launching the book and talking about the book, that's some of the things I talk about. And that's really some of the focus I have today.
Let's talk a little bit about your focus today. I mean, the book has just been published, and as you were sharing, it's about ready, or it already has been run out on the Amazon site. So that's a very good problem to have. I noticed as I was going through the page on Amazon, did you self-publish this book or did you work with a publisher to help get this out?
So I worked with a company that helps people write their book.
Okay.
No, they're not a publisher.
Okay.
And what I did is that I looked at writing it and then having like a Simon & Schuster take the book and all that. And what I noticed within the industry, and there are bad apples in all industries.
Of course.
And when I really dug into this, it was like, oh my gosh, they take how much percent for Simon & Schuster to launch your book? And they're going to wind up, and I've always felt like, don't let the people run your own ship. And I just decided that I was going to publish it myself. I was going to write it. And I got a ghostwriter, and I also got an editor. Mm-hmm. And I wound up having like all the right people in the right places. And I learned what you need to do a first class book and make it so that it has what it needs in there to accomplish what I'm trying to do to the public, like about whistleblowing, about the opioid crisis how it started, and about patient rights and what we need to do, and hopefully to generate information about legislation in some of those areas that we may need to look at and change, like in the whistleblower law or in the False Claims Act, how the whistleblower is protected. There's a lot there, and it took a lot it almost took me 2.5 years to sit down, not just to write it, but to edit it. And I must have been through the book like 15, 18 times. But to not just do that, but to make sure that when I'm finished, it's what I want to say to the public. And it took a while to do that.
Sure. There's two questions that are coming to mind. And one is in this book, and I'm sure throughout there are any number of recommendations, but are there one or two recommendations? Like if I was to have my best next move, okay, or what would one or two of those moves be in this industry or the government or the justice, pharmaceutical? What should happen?
Oh, what I think should happen after I've gone through all this?
Mm-hmm.
One is that in the False Claims Act, there needs to be something written that protects the whistleblower, okay? A lot of times the whistleblower steps through this where they get a lawyer and the whistleblower has this evidence and they talk to the lawyer says, we're going to file a key temp case and this is what we're going to do and we're going to go forward. And the justice looks at the preliminary filing and they go, oh, we're going to seal the case. And then that allows the Justice Department prosecutors to wind up investigating and see whether they're going to intervene in the case or not. A lot of times, if they don't intervene, you're not very successful. If they intervene, about 80% of the time, you're successful with the case. There's a section called Section H in the False Claims Act that protects the whistleblower monetarily, that if you lose your job from being blackballed, it's like treble damages. But the problem with that is that that's at the end of the case. Where is it that, like, for example, I had somebody from the company call when I was interviewing to be a director of training. And I was escorted out of the building because it was an overt being blackballed. Where is it that that stops? And I'm not a lawyer, so it's like, what do we need to do to change the False Claims Act? That those people are protected. Look, if you don't have a good case, it's going to get thrown out, right? That's okay with me. But if you have a good case where, like, and I'm just saying the pharmaceutical company, where they're able to do the most damage to a whistleblower is early on. You get fired, you get blackballed, and you lose everything. And that just helps them because you're not able to bring a more effective case. That's one area for the whistleblower and the False Claims Act. The other is that we need to take a look at the FDA. What in the world are we doing allowing a drug to be approved when the company has already been a first offender for promoting a Schedule II drug that people have started to overdose with. And not to mention all the other addictive properties that occurred with that. Why are we doing that? And I just don't get that. And what needs to be done and who we need to take the cause up to do that. And that's part of what I'm doing with like Fed Up and Prop, is that I'm speaking with them or trying to work with them and try to change legislation.
And that's actually a real timely statement, because I'm really curious now that you've shared a little bit about your background and your journey, the book, and you've come out the other end of this tunnel, rather long tunnel. And what are you doing? What are you doing now to take this message of the changes that need to take place? So let's talk about Fed Up and Prop and some of the other work that you're doing.
What we're doing is that we're trying to coordinate how we can work together right now. This is just a couple of days ago. We actually met up with the founder of both those organizations. And we had a nice long talk about what's the next steps and how can I help the organization. And probably part of that is speaking engagements for them and to let them know how this came about, what can we do, and where are we going with legislation. And I think that's really important.
Okay. There was the other question I wanted to ask you. Now that, again, you have a new life right now. I mean, and you've come again through this very tumultuous time. You've got the book. When you have shared this journey via this book with your our family and friends, they're looking for a bestseller here. They want nothing but the best. But the people whose lives you've come across and know about your journey, your story, and they've read this book, what has been their reaction to it?
Their reaction is that they're so proud of me. And it touches me to the core that people are supportive and know that this cause is just so important. That the CDC just released their 2019 opioid overdoses, 71,000. The number is up. And that predates Corona. That's when you know, and that's when you have friends call you and say, hey, we're so proud of you. This is really important. And there's just not enough people doing this. And that's why, not just for me to promote patient advocacy, not for me to try to work with people in legislation, it's also for other people to join me in making this happen.
Who are some of the other people that you want or should be joining you in this new journey?
Well, there's other organizations that we're trying to contact, Shatterproof and American Association of Treatment of Opioid Dependency. And there's other people that we're working with. And that list will grow as I become more familiar with who's involved and who's a player in the opioid crisis and to fight that.
Okay. Bruce, in our show, we have a segment, we call it Insight to Go, and I really suspect you've already shared a lot of it, but if you would like to leave our listeners with some insight, idea, thought, quote, that they could take away from this very powerful interview, what would you want to share with them?
I think one of the things I want to share with them, there's several coined phrases that I use a lot of times, but I think one of the things that I want to share that I think is really important and really impactful, and it's impacted my life. It has changed my life. Before I was a rep manager, making a lot of money, had a lot of material stuff, and just going along to get along in life. And what came about is this monumental change in not just what I was doing, but it changed in me. And yes, I went through enormous struggles and lost everything and then rebuild it again. But Howard, you have no idea how wonderful that is to know about self and how strong you are as an individual and how the idea of just not giving up and how important that is. That if there was one message, yeah, it was horrible and I went through that, but anybody can make a change. Anybody can make a difference, and they really can. And that, I think that's the most important lesson in the whole process.
Fantastic. Bruce, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, to stay in touch, where are the best places for them to go?
The best thing they can go to is if you went to bruceboyce.com, that's my website. And there's a click on for the book there that you can order. But also, we have on the website up-to-date news articles. We have all the different videos of 60 Minutes and John Oliver's show that the case was on, and also the CBS Whistleblower show. There's a chock full of information that they can look at and glean some information on.
Fantastic. Well, we'll most certainly share backlinks on our show notes, to your website. And I have a feeling, by the way, I should thank you. I think I'm going to be in good company with John Oliver and 60 Minutes and all that. So,
yes.
So thank you. And I know you're also on the website. There's the links back to the social sites like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter.
Yes.
So we'll provide those in the show notes, as well as a link back to Amazon. Bruce, it's been a pleasure. It's an honor to have you on the Success Insight podcast to share about your journey, talk about this very, it's still a very current topic. And in this wonderful book, Cold Comfort. And there are books of our that have been published lately of our ages, what we're going through in the opioid crisis, what's going on in our government, et cetera. And this is one of those books for the ages. And I think the public needs to wake up and be aware of what's going on. And we need to take charge and hold not only our government, but our agencies accountable. Thank you so much for doing the work that you did, and we really appreciate you being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Howard, and it's been my pleasure.
All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Bruce Boyce. We are, again, extremely fortunate that he's been able to take some time away from his schedule. He's just launched this wonderful book, Cold Comfort, One Man's Struggle to Stop the Illegal Marketing of Powerful Opioid Drugs and Save Lives. Do go out to his website, bruceboyce.com. And again, we'll provide links back to the website and to his social sites on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. If you're like me, we're driving in a car. I listen to public radio. There's the whole opioid crisis. And there was another pharmaceutical that I remember I was always hearing about. And I know throughout this country, this issue of opioids and really being hooked on them, it's harmful to the individual, to the family, and the community. And we really appreciate, what Bruce has done in this long journey he's been on to help bring to light what is truly going on. And so it's in our best interest to take this information and act on it, or, get involved in the community to prevent this from happening again. So these are the types of episodes we love on the Success Insight podcast, because we do our share of children's books and zombie apocalypses, but every once in a while, we or hopefully more than every once in a while, we have some really phenomenal authors, and the books they're writing are designed to make changes in the community. So if you liked this podcast, if you appreciated it, if you want to hear more, do visit us on the successinsightpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn, Success Insight Podcast pages. And we can find us on Twitter. My website is foxcoaching.com. That's the business side of our podcast. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, let us know what you thought. And by all means, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, be safe, practice social distancing, wear your mask, and take care of yourselves. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.